My name is Andrew Riad. I was born May 2nd, 2000. Region of birth in terms of country, Egypt, Middle East, and North Africa.
Can you state where your family migrated to and when they migrated?
I was born in Egypt. I lived there for 7 years. We migrated to Jordan for 4 years, went back to Egypt for a year. There was one time, Morsi was in charge. That was the year we were in. And then we fled from Egypt to the United Arab Emirates in 2011. And we've been here ever since.
And where did you move to in the UAE?
Dubai.
For the first time that your parents migrated to Jordan, what do you think were the reasons that compelled them, and why Jordan specifically?
So that was completely because of my dad's work. We went to Jordan because my dad got a better opportunity, and we packed up and moved to Jordan for 4 years because that was the contract. And I mean, my dad didn't want to work abroad and see us like once or twice a year, so we just moved with him to Jordan.
And when you think back to that time, what are your memories of Jordan, or what were your earliest impressions of it?
So when I was in Jordan, I was quite young, when I was 7 years old, up until 11. So it was all kids clubs that I remember for some reason. I remember all the kinds of like kids fun factory, Jordan Kids Club, like Creation Station was my mom's. She opened her own little daycare there also. So every Friday, like after church, because there's a big Coptic community also in Jordan, which is why also my mom decided to move us. Because then what my parents do is if we were to move somewhere, they ensure that there's a Coptic community so that we can assimilate, easily or more easily. So there's a big Coptic community there. So after church on Friday, every Friday, I would go to Creation Station with my mom and chill there. I remember that a lot. I remember church there a lot. Like it's a vivid memory because it was mostly construction. So after like Sunday school, we'd play with like the rocks and the stuff on literally on the floor. Um that was like Jordan for me for some reason, and I haven't been there ever since. I remember Rainforest Cafe for some reason because we used to go there a lot.
And when you went back to Egypt after Jordan, how did you find the transition?
I was excited to go back to Egypt because I really miss because that was my first move out of the country. So it was, and I was quite young and new, so I don't think I really understood what was happening. But I remember because when I was going back to Egypt, I was much older. I was 11 years old. So when I moved back to Egypt, I was really excited. I was like, this is it. Like time to really like, hone down on roots and experience Egypt. And because I felt like I had missed out for a while because like I at some point in Jordan, I spoke Jordanian Arabic better than Egyptian Arabic, So then I was just excited to go back to Egypt. And my parents were really excited also. Like if it were up to them, they wouldn't have, moved out of Egypt. So I think we were all just excited.
And you've kind of touched on this already, but at what point did your parents decide to make the move again, and why Dubai this time?
So my dad was already looking for my dad was just getting job offers again. And my dad was at Dubai at the time, and we weren't going to move to Dubai, like it wasn't planned at all. It was the height of Morsi regime. And then it was like a really, like the one year we decided to go back to Egypt, all hell broke loose, to be honest. And it was insanely like scary to be Coptic. So my mom one day up and told us we're moving to Dubai. We don't know what we're gonna do, but we need to get out of the country. So I was like, okay. I didn't say anything. And we were the last flight out of Egypt. The last operating flight out of Egypt to anywhere in the world until the airport shut down for a few days. We came to Dubai, did nothing for months. I knew like I was late, I was behind school, I wasn't in school. We were living in a hotel apartment for 6 months maybe until my dad found a job and we found a school and enrolled. and I came in late to school semester, everything. It was just like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're leaving, you know.
When you think back to that time, what stands out about, the transition?
From Egypt to Dubai, oh my God, I remember like vividly feeling heartbroken, like on the flight. I had like a whole movie scene in my head. I tend to be really theatrical and dramatic naturally, but I had like a whole movie scene on the flight, like looking down at Egypt and like saying bye. And I didn't know when I was coming back because in our heads, in our minds, Egypt is no longer safe for us. We don't know when to go back. You know, like this is home essentially. This was home. That like even in Jordan, when I lived in Jordan, it was we were never to set up home anywhere. Home was always Egypt, you know. And now I'm saying goodbye, not see you later to Egypt. You know, I'm not going like in Jordan, we knew we were gonna come back. It wasn't like long term. But that flight out of Egypt to Dubai, especially when we heard it was closing down, also the airport, and we were the last flight, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, I'm going to be one of those diaspora kids that just is not in touch with home whatsoever and is like whitewashed and and oh my God. And no, it hurt. Like it hurt a lot. And also we didn't have the best memory of Egypt leaving, you know, like I don't know, it's just a really scary time. I remember even like my mom and my sister and I were living alone in Egypt because my dad was trying to find somewhere else because we were like we can't live here anymore. And it was just like, you know, it's scary. Like my mom would tell us to remove our crosses when we go down the street, or like at home one night it was like we heard banging on our door مش عارف ايه طب ساحر المسلم افتحوا الباب ساحر المسلم افتحوا الباب. And my mom was like, bro, and my mom just took us, and we were just praying behind the couch, and we were like, this is it, this is it. Like, we were just praying. And, you know, it went, it passed. Alhamdulillah, we're here, you know, thank God. But it was a really, really, really scary time. So on the flight, I guess like there was just so many negative emotions, and I almost villainized Egypt, I think, for a bit. Like, not gonna lie, I did villainize Egypt, where I was like, this is not home, and I don't feel like I belong. I'm sure A and whatever. But at the same time, I was like heartbroken. You know, I was leaving some place that like, because before when I used to live in Egypt, I knew places, I knew areas, I familiarized myself with scents, with images, with people. Um, so I was when I thought of Egypt, I thought of people and scents and places, you know. So it's like sad, to say the least, you know. And then we came to Dubai. I was like, oh my God, I never even heard of Dubai when I first came. Like I was landing and I was like, what is Dubai? Like, I don't even know what this means, you know? Sorry, it's my dog.
During that time, how did you, if at all, stay connected to Egypt?
So in Dubai also is a huge Coptic community as well. So that's also, I guess, why we chose to settle here as well. When my parents decided to settle here, it's a huge Coptic community. I think top 10 around the world. Like it's big. Again, just like Jordan, it was like church was, you know, fundamental to assimilating and to familiarizing ourselves with Egypt again. But slowly along the years, and Dubai will do this to you to some degree, you do become to somewhat disconnected, you know. Like I remember first moving here and then looking back at that now and where we are now, it's different in terms of our mindset, in terms of how we were raised, in terms of how we think now versus then. A lot of things have changed, I think, you know, drastically. Not necessarily westernized, not necessarily liberalized, it's just different, you know. And I think because that has something to do with like Dubai being like a culture melting pot, literally, you know. So I think that has some sort of effect on the subconscious. Um, but also like after a while, we went back to Egypt like every year, you know, like every summer I go to Egypt for 2 weeks, and that was it. It was just 2 weeks. And yeah.
And in terms of, I mean, you've already mentioned church as a sort of unifying place, but how did you find community and what was your relationship generally with other Egyptians in Dubai throughout the time you were there?
I don't know, because it also came at a time when we went to Dubai where I really antagonized the church as well. Like, so where I was really like at odds with the institution, you know, and religion, and so I really I think I detached myself quite a bit from Egyptian and whatever that entails, whether it be Muslim, Coptic, Christian, Jewish, anything, I think I detached myself for a while. And then it didn't help because school, I went to an international school here in Dubai where, the norm was non-religious, the norm was materialistic, the norm was, like third culture kid energy also, so that didn't help the detachment, that it catalyzed it a lot more. And it was like that for a while, but then slowly as I got older, I became more involved at church, and I think that's one kind of facet where I began touching, kind of that Egyptianness again to some degree, because like in church we spoke Arabic. We had imports coming from Egypt, like all our our aish baladi, our petit four would come from our church. That was where we'd buy it from. So it was very like, again, it was like sense, people, taste, images that I could kind of tap in. And the good thing about Coptic churches is that no matter where you are in the world, they look the same. So once you enter church, it's like I entered Egypt almost, it was like a weird kind of, I'm not in Egypt, but I'm in Egypt kind of energy. And I think once I reorganized my how I viewed my religion and my spirituality, and then when I stopped antagonizing Egypt as a whole, I think I did a 180, where I wanted to see, smell, breathe, taste Egypt as much as I could, and in whatever capacity I could, being outside of Egypt. And then I think that started with and revolved around to some degree around the church, because that was like the most hands-on experience of Egypt, more than anything else, more than movies or Global Village, and the Egypt section, or like more than any of those things. It was a very, like, you really did export and import Egypt, so yeah.
I don't know how old your sister was at the time, but generally for your family, do you feel like there were any challenges or struggles adapting to life in Dubai?
Yeah, my sister is 2 years younger than me. So my sister, I think, and she's gonna be here for a while also. So if we go like 2 years ahead, she'll be in Dubai a lot more than me, like she would have lived here a lot more than me eventually. So and she came from a really, like, when my sister came, she was in grade three. She was young. But we always have like this running joke, for example, that I will understand Arabic. This is so silly, but I will understand Arabic a lot more. But Joy's pronunciation, my sister, is a lot better. So when we went to Egypt for the first time in 2 years or 3 years this summer, we had a pact that I would translate for Joy and then she would reply, because I knew more and understood more, but my accent was always, oh, he didn't live in Egypt. But her accent sounds like she was like born and raised, for some reason. Um, so I think it kind of affected us differently because Joy was much younger and then grew up here literally. And whereas I did my preteen and teen years here, and I think that it was different. With my parents, it was hard at first. Like, definitely it was hard. My parents always also like now say, like, for example, in Jordan, we made like lifelong friends in Jordan. My parents, as a family, when you have like family friends, they made lifelong friends in Jordan. In Egypt, of course, they have their lifelong friends from uni, from high school, whatever. Um, Here, they never did for some reason. And I think that was like a big issue in the beginning where they felt like a little alone, I think. And I sensed it in the beginning as well, because I was at the age when I came to Dubai where friends were everything. Like, that was my entire life, like we had to see each other 24/7. We had to go to parties. We had to like just consume one another. So family took a backseat almost at some point. And I think my parents felt really alone for a long time. And it was kind of sad, I think, in the beginning. So I think it was like difficult to some, even though we had the church, even though we had, and there was a Coptic community. Just because there's a community, you can't force assimilation or kinship or bonds. You can't force these things. Like, just because there's a community doesn't mean we all get along and we're all besties. So I think for them it was really difficult in the beginning. Joy, I think, had a really smooth assimilation because she was so young. I had that whole moment of antagonizing everything and everyone, like a little emo kid. I don't know what's going on. I was really in my field. Something was going on. I don't know. But I think later, so I think maybe end of my high school career and beginning university, and in university I stayed in the UAE. I didn't. I had the opportunity to leave, but I don't know. It just like it made sense because at the end, my familiarity, along with everyone, I think in my family, with the exception of my parents, I guess, my sister and I, we knew Dubai a lot more than we knew Egypt or Cairo, a lot more. We knew how the culture was. We spoke the language, obviously, to some degree, use that with like a, grain of salt. We understood street names and neighborhoods, we knew Emirati culture to some degree. We experienced Emirati culture. We had friends here. We made lifelong friends here. So at some point, I did see a shift in us where we became so much more familiar with the UAE, where it felt even a lot more familiar than Egypt. But we were always told in the beginning, like even when I was coming, it was just only temporary. Like we were to create the goal was to stay out of Egypt for maybe a year and come back, But here we are, like 11 years later, we're still in Dubai, Stereotypical, I guess, assimilation and then that rejection and that friction. And then in the end, you familiarize yourself. And with that familiarity also came a lot of like shifts. Like I remember also like in my end of high school kind of phase, my parents did like a little 180. Because in Egypt, we used to be like extremely religious, like church multiple times a week. I used to have Coptic lessons at home. I used to be a shames, a deacon. We used to go to choir and Bible study and Sunday school. Like it was because also when you're born Coptic, it is like a neat, like that's the only way we remain, and clinging on to the faith. I've never met like a non-religious Copt, But when we came to Dubai, it decreased a lot, and with that, and there was a shift also in that where we became a lot less institutional things, a lot more kind of familial, I guess we had to kind of depend on each other a lot.
I'm also curious in terms of when it came to the decision of where to go to university, what sort of prompted you to stay in the UAE? What were other options you were considering? Was Egypt ever an option you considered?
Oh. I literally never considered Egypt. Because it came to a point where I was like, I'm not going back. I don't even know what to do in Egypt. Like when I go to Egypt, it's like, marhaba, it's like embarrassing. But we try not to be, we try. I think that's all that matters, I went to NYU Abu Dhabi. Like number one is because of the scholarship. Like it was an incredible offer. I couldn't, and I had applied to two other universities in the US and I got accepted. And I got some scholarships with them also, but it just wasn't as incredible as the offer that NYU Abu Dhabi gave me. And I remember even before the offer, I went to candidate weekend and I was like, oh my God, I have to come here now. Like, oh my, they really sell it with candidate weekend, So I was like, okay, it's not my number one. I don't know. Freshman year, I thought about this a lot where I was like, where would I have been in life if I didn't go to uni in the United Arab Emirates, if I, left for a couple of years, what kind of trajectory or pattern of growth would I have followed? Like would I be me still? Would I be different? But all in all, I think I'm happy I stayed. Like it's familiar, and we always crave, I guess, familiarity and comfort and that security. So and that's something I never had in life. Like we were really like at some point in life we were also in Canada for a couple of months. Like because here and there, I was just very. It was a very unstable kind of always moving life. So when we create a home here in Dubai for 10 years or 8 years at the time, I don't know, I felt like it was like just better be safe, the place, like it's close to home, and I also was like, I was really cradled and sheltered, my entire life. And I'm really close to my parents. So that kind of idea of, moving across the world and being alone scared me also to some degree, So I was happy with my decision, even though I traveled only an hour by car and I felt like I was in a different place in the world. Like it was a completely new world to me, because NYU Abu Dhabi was not like any other school I had seen in the UAE ever, and I thought I'd seen it all. So it was almost a culture, like I used to say, it was almost like a culture shock in the beginning, even though it was 1 hour by car.
When you think of how migration has affected your life, what do you think has been most significant?
I mean, I think one thing, obviously, for certain, I wouldn't have been like the person I am today if it weren't for like migration and how and where I moved around and for how long. I was actually talking to my parents about this the other day, and we were talking about like how life would have been if we stayed in Egypt, for example, and how I would have been, even from like still from an outsider's perspective, looking at Egyptian communities now, whether it be like online or when I visit Egypt and explore these different niches and different underground hubs, I feel like there's little something inside of me that's like I feel like I could have like survived in Egypt, but also I think I could have appreciated a lot of things, or because of my intersectionalities also, like with other things, I feel like I could have found niches to sustain and possibly even to flourish, but I don't think as much, probably, I would say, as like if I moved there, had I not moved around. I feel like I always say that everywhere I was in life was perfect for my age at the time. Like I moved out of Egypt to Jordan, and Jordan was great for that kind of age demographic because I remember all the kids clubs and stuff at the time they were popping in Jordan, in Amman in particular. So when I moved there, it was like fun and good for and great for a kid my age. And then I moved to Dubai, and Dubai was at the time also perfect place for whatever a kid wanted at that time from 11 years old onwards. You had everything here, like Kidzania, Sega Republic, and Global Village, and like, and more opened up. So I thought, like, in terms of like a kid and what a kid wanted growing up, like, thank God, alhamdulillah, honest, like I had everything, like my parents made sure wherever we were to give us everything in whatever capacity they could. So I don't feel like I missed out on some beautiful experience had I not migrated or life changing, because I feel like I am the person I am with my mentality, with everything with my values, with the morals that I have because I moved around, and because I was at specific areas in the world at given times even. Like even as heartbreaking as it is, like 2011 for me and migrating out of Egypt, not knowing when to come back or if we will come back, also like that shaped something very fundamental in me as well, that allowed for me to go from antagonizing and kind of hating my religion to being proud to be Coptic, and what that means to me. I began understanding like what I like gravitate towards in the faith and what I don't, what I want people to take away from understanding what Coptic means and what I don't, what I like about being Christian, what I don't. So I feel like I learned a lot, I think, about myself and about moving around and how that I think shapes an individual. I also learned a lot about assimilation, and how tedious it is, but also how like difficult and sometimes aggressive it is, like to go from one school to being a new kid. I was always a new kid, like, and I think that moving around also when you're younger as a child shapes you in a way. So I'm pretty sure like I am a people pleaser, for example. But I think like the environmental factors of having to always assimilate, having to always like want to impress people and please people and make friends, that probably did something, on my psyche, probably also.
This year was the first time you went to Egypt in a very long time. What was that experience like for you?
It was incredible. Like I have never felt the way I felt going to Egypt for the longest time. And last time we went to Egypt, we only went to Egypt because my tita, Allah yarhamha, passed away. And my tita was like my mother, like she raised me. My first words were tita, like sometimes I loved her more than my own mom, like, and my mom knows this, and she loved me like as much as her mom, as much as my mom, sometimes even more. And my mom knew that also. So going to Egypt in 2018 was difficult, and you could just feel that like energy in the entire family. My mom, I've never seen my mom like that in my entire life, where my mom like overnight was orphaned and I had to almost parent and console her and be strong, even though I was like, my mom and I were breaking the most at the time because we were the closest to my teta out of everyone in the entire family. So it was a really, really like just horrible. I didn't want to be in Egypt. I wanted to go in and out. I didn't want to be associated with Egypt because I was mourning a loss, and I feel like it was just a very negative energy for me. And then that was the last time I went to Egypt, 2018. Because then we didn't go the next year because it was intense Sharia still. And then COVID hit, And this was the first year we go back. And it was the first year also I used to go to Egypt and stay with my family. I would never have friends in Egypt. I don't know people in Egypt, And then after university, obviously I made Egyptian friends who lived in Egypt, and after social media, I made online friends that lived in Egypt. So I was able to meet people, I was able to go to Egypt and experience Egypt as a 20-year-old, you know what I mean? Which was another entirely new world that I had never experienced, which is why I was talking about like the maybe opportunity to flourish in niches earlier, because I saw some of it when I went back to Egypt this summer. And I was like, wow, this is not what I remembered from Egypt at all. And so I've never experienced this kind of Egypt in my entire life. Like also everyone has this like stories of Sahel with your friends. Bro, I know what they're talking about. Sahel for me was my family and a fan, and that's about it. Like I never understood these experiences, at all. I didn't go to Sahel. I was in Egypt for a week only, but I wish I had stayed longer. And that I think was just like I feel like I had a trajectory where I was like antagonizing, hating, to accepting, to plateau, to loving, to like decolonizing or something. I don't know where we are now, but it's like it's like a 180. We went from hate to shut up, I love. Like I don't know. I had like a shift, I guess. So I think that this trip was like, I guess, the cherry on top, I also got to do a lot of things that I really wanted to do to tap into my Copticity more. Like I visited Monteta Zabalin for the first time, and I just literally just like watched the documentary and understood, an organization working for Zabalin there, and I wanted to go see it. So then to be there was like so surreal also. I just had really beautiful moments in Egypt this summer where it reaffirmed for me, I guess, one, my Egyptianness, and two, also like, like, okay, Andrew, like we migrated to a couple places. Yes, we don't speak perfect Arabic. Yes, we may be a little more this and that. But at the end of the day, you can find home also in Egypt.